All right, welcome back. It's week two. Got Randy with me this time. We got all our things ironed out. We're never going to try to be here Thursdays or Fridays, and we'll do let you know as soon as we know ahead of time. I actually posted it on Facebook tonight, real quick, but we'll get you guys a schedule. It's a 2 to 2 hour schedule. So, real quick, thanks to the boys from the Buzz slash Rockin' Horse for that cool song, intro into the show. They officially now know that I pirated it from them, but it's not copyrighted, so it doesn't matter. Anyways, we're here live on Facebook and live on YouTube. It's the Fletch Entertainment Network on either one. Facebook, give us a like. YouTube, hit the bell, hit subscribe, so you can stay close to what we're doing here. This is one of the most um, done shows on the network, the College Football Corner. Randy being an Alabama guy, myself being an OSU Go Buckeyes guy. But we call it the way it is. If our teams stink, our teams stink. Just fortunately for us, they haven't much in the last couple of decades, so that's kind of cool. So, pretty decent week this week. Last week we had some really good games. For a little recap, what did you watch last week, Randy?
I watched Clemson in Georgia. That was actually I thought that was going to be a really good game. It was 6-0 at halftime, pretty much a defensive battle. Kind of thought, well, Clemson kind of squabbled some opportunities here. This could be a heck of a game, and
Right.
it was our anniversary night, so we went and got dinner and came back, and I ran in to turn the TV back on, and it was 28-0. I'm like, well, that didn't go so good after halftime. So
Yeah.
Dabo's going to have to get into the portal if he wants to be competitive with everybody else. It's they talked about that on game day last week, and I mean, you don't have any choice but to do that. If he's not going to stay up with the times, I mean, Clemson's going to be right where they're at. They're going to be in the middle of the pack, and they're going to lose to the better teams. I think um, you got to get into that portal and get those guys and bring them in because I mean, it's changed, and you have to change with the game.
Yeah, I agree. It's free agency in college football the way it is right now, and they're thinking about changing, getting rid of the spring portal window. But either way you slice the transfer portal, either way you slice it, if you're not doing it, then everybody else is. That's the way you got to look at it. And you could be missing out on a player because you may like all the guys you got, but you're only one injury away from losing a stud. You just never know. You got to be flexible on that. And if he's kind of stubborn and they don't produce, that could be his job. He could be shipped
Right.
off somewhere else because they want results. And he did pretty darn good, when the portal wasn't a thing, and for a while with Venables, obviously. So he's got to. But and I agree with you. I thought that was a big game on the schedule. It was noon at Georgia. I thought, boy, this is a chance for Clemson to really show everybody that they're still relevant. And they didn't. They played good. It was a tight game, like I said, first half, but they just weren't there in the second half, and there were some mistakes made. And it's like, okay, just like most all games in the first week. In that game, how good is Georgia? How bad is Clemson? Or how bad is Georgia? How good is Clemson? Because you never won't know until they play more teams. But interestingly enough, this week, Clemson is hosting Appalachian State, and that's not a really historically great team to try to right the ship on because usually those boys come to play.
They'll sneak up and bite you. They've done it many times before. But going back to your question, the other game that I watched last week was USC and LSU. That was actually a pretty good game, and I thought that was a huge win for Lincoln Riley and USC because I mean they seems like so far whenever they've run up against the big boys, they haven't came through, and that was a really big win for them.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of, at one point I was thinking that game was in Death Valley, and I thought there's no way USC is going to go down there and win that one in week one.
Las
But good luck
Vegas.
out. It was in Vegas, so a neutral site. And yeah, that was a big win. That's an SEC win on the schedule. So if they are able to pull out some wins in the Big Ten schedule this year, they got that already on the books. I don't think it really hurts LSU a whole bunch if they run the table, so to speak, if they win a lot of games, but it might have showed them where their weaknesses were. Both those teams were historically horrible on defense last year.
Right.
So it's somewhat of the turnaround. It was kind of somewhat of a lower scoring game than a lot of people think. I thought, what was it? What was the final score in that game?
What was it? 27, 20
Yeah,
or something like that.
you would think about it. Both
High
those
scoring
teams
game.
quarterbacks, and they were both drafted, and they were both Heisman Trophy winners. So that was that's a lot lost right there on both sides of the ball. So
Right, right.
that would have been a completely different game if it was last year, because those previews would have been there. But nevertheless, good win for USC, good win for the Big Ten, sort of. Not a necessarily bad loss for LSU, but they definitely got to, right the ship to a certain degree. They would have loved to have had that one. There's no doubt.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, so
Well, and it's like you said. I mean, it was a non-league game, and it may have told us a little something. It may not have, like you said, if LSU runs the table in the SEC. Of course, I mean they'll be good, but I mean the effect that it may have is when we get down to 12 teams, and those teams are in a spot for whatever. I mean,
right.
it's going to be hard to pick LSU over USC, given that they finished the season the way that we think that they will.
Yeah.
It'd be hard pressed to put LSU in over USC.
Right. I mean, if LSU is vying for a final spot against somebody else of like not one of the top 4 spots, obviously, let's say they don't win the SEC, but they have a 2-loss record, they're going to go up against the team from the Big 12, and here they played USC but lost, where the other team maybe played somebody never just. So it looks good on your schedule. You played somebody. It looks better if you win it, but it looks good you played. And vice versa. If USC isn't in the final game in the Big 10, but they're considering a spot, they got LSU on their schedule. If LSU has a decent season, that's a good win for them. So it's just like it has been before. So that will pay dividends in one way or another for sure.
Right.
You would imagine. I was thinking, looking a little ahead, kind of forecasting stuff that I had put on a forum a few weeks ago, that I didn't think Michigan was going to lose to USC. Watch that game a little bit. I'm thinking, you know what, that might be a loss for them. It'd be a tough game, it looks like, because they're fairly explosive, and by the time they see them, they'll probably be even more so. But
right.
Yeah, did you catch any of Colorado and North Dakota State, the FCS, the Jackrabbits?
I
the
did.
The Bison.
I did not. I did catch the highlights of it.
Yeah.
And actually, the very end of it. Then I caught the highlights of it after that. And
I turned that thing on, and the Bison was winning. I'm like, hey,
Right.
So I watched it, and I watched them get the lead back and win. But boy, I tell you, they gave Colorado all they could handle, with no doubt. And they look up that Travis Hunter guy. Wow. I mean, if he can stay healthy, he looks like a complete front runner for the Heisman just in one game. And it's early, so I'm not saying he's going to win it. But, man, defense and offense, he had crazy defensive stops and a pick, I believe. And then he had a touchdown that the dude is just caught it, curled, and gone, couldn't catch him. Again, it was an FCS school, but they really make me think that they potentially could win this week. We'll get into that game a little later. But, yeah, they but playing I keep saying the Jackrabbits in South Dakota, the Bison. That was kind of a Bison against Buffalo. It's kind of a neat little thing going on there. But that team's always they're almost like App State. They're good, and it's a hard out. And that was a hard fought win for Colorado, no doubt.
Well, and we were just talking about the Colorado-Nebraska game that's coming up. One of the listed teams that we wanted to talk about, since we were talking about Colorado here.
Right.
That was going to be interesting, and we were saying just before we came on air that, I was saying anyways, that Nebraska, the last couple of years has somewhat struggled. They haven't done what a lot of people expected them to do. So this game coming up with Colorado is going to be pretty interesting, more so for Nebraska than Colorado, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree. We can throw that up right now. We don't have to do it all in one time, but this is definitely one of the games we got highlighted. I was listening to the radio today. A guy from Nebraska was on talking. He said, this is at night, under the lights, at Nebraska. Last year was obviously in Colorado. They got Dylan Raiola, who looked pretty decent again in last week's game against, I think, UTEP is who they played. Even though at one point they were losing that game, but, it's a game. Doesn't matter how you win as long as you win it.
Right.
And but I think their quarterback play looks better. The deal with Colorado is they're really bad on both up front on both sides of the ball. They've got star players out on the outside and the quarterback, but their lines are just not great. So if they can change that and shore that up, I think they got a good chance of beating Nebraska. Nebraska's got a decent running game. It looks like again, it was all it's all 1 week, so who really knows? Home field advantage. You're going to have to give it to Nebraska because they're at home, and that crowd will be rocking. This is probably the biggest game in a while. There, that team hasn't been to a bowl game. I think I heard since 2016. So they're starving. Colorado is probably not that much farther behind, if not worse than them. I don't know how was the last time they had a great team. So it's hard. It's going to be hard to say, but I'm actually I was picking Nebraska, and I'm kind of leaning towards Colorado now after what I saw because I think they got a year under their belt with that offense where this guy doesn't. He's a freshman for Nebraska. Shedeur Sanders, call him what he is, but he can move around the pocket, and he's got a pretty decent arm. I don't think he's a great, what do you call it, like where the reading defenses, but to keep plays alive and make things happen, he's got some weapons. Jimmy Horn Jr., I think is his name. That guy is the fastest guy on the team. He's faster than Travis Hunter. So I think in the end they might, if it's a shootout, they'll probably win, but Colorado. But if they can wear them down or whatever, you never know. But it should be interesting. But it should be a nice game to watch in the evening. I think by the time Ohio State's game is out of reach, it should be on. I think it starts late at 10 or something.
Didn't Nebraska and Colorado played last year, didn't they? Yeah,
that was the first game out of the shoot for Colorado was TCU beating the Final Four team from last year pretty bad.
Right.
And then it's either the second or third game. There was one of the 3 games they won in the first 3. They beat Nebraska. Yeah. So this is like a rekindling of the Big 12 bad blood back in the day because now Nebraska's the Big 10. So they used to play a lot. They started it last year, so this is Nebraska's starting to have it at home. So they're going to be out for blood. It should be a hard hitting game for sure, and it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. But offensively, I give it a little bit to Colorado because they kind of got that stars under that deal for at least a year now. They've got a number of games under their belt. So
right. So I agree.
That should be an interesting game. So. So last week Alabama played. Who was it?
Western Kentucky.
Western Kentucky. That's right. The Hilltoppers.
TJ Finley, who has been to Auburn, LSU. He's been a little bit everywhere. What the heck might happen to my thing here? I'm hoping he'll answer the drag on. There it is. I told my grandson, if your mom calls, answer the phone. You think he's going to answer it? Nope. Nope. Oh boy.
So TJ Finley.
Oh, I was going to say that TJ Finley. He had been at Auburn and he had been at where else? LSU.
Yeah, I know Auburn. I did hear that. So.
Auburn and LSU, like 6'7", 240 pounds. This great big giant guy, in his 7th year, or whatever, however long they can play now, 10 years, 12 years, whatever it is.
Right.
But, So he was talking before the game that Alabama's all new now. They're going to be shocked because this is not the Western Kentucky of old and. Well, we all know what happened. So
yeah,
that didn't work out. But I didn't. What I was getting at was I didn't know that TJ Finley was still around, and that he was playing at Western Kentucky. Like I said, he was a highly recruited guy that was 2 of the bigger programs in college football, and evidently it just never did work out for him.
He was probably, I guess, maybe stuck behind Bo Nix in Auburn before Nix left there, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah. Yeah, Ohio State played them last year at West Kentucky, and I got a buddy I know is like, Ohio State will win, but this team is going to score some points, and it wasn't quite like that at all, But nobody, not taking anything away from them. More than anything, they just didn't have the horses to stay with them, But most teams like that just aren't as deep. But yeah, so Ohio State played Akron, and it was a little slow. The very first, Akron won the toss, deferred. 3 and out for Ohio State, and I literally was like, not this again, because it just shades of Kyle McCord, Duke can't get a first down or whatever.
No,
but after that, it went pretty good. It was touch and go in the first half, and then they pulled away in the second half, and their offense really clicked a lot better. You can tell. I was doing a lot of reading this week, Chip Kelly with the play calling. He kept at the run game, and they got things going, and they were that. Receiver looks great, Jeremiah Smith. So they looked solid and nice 50, a couple defensive scores. Defense looked decent, coming into their own, in the first game, obviously. So, but that front six, I think for Akron, they were saying on the broadcast how they were like a junior and senior laden bunch of guys, so they have played some ball together, and that showed. They had some good plays on defense to stop the Buckeyes a few times in the first half.
Well, it was still Ohio State versus Akron, no matter how you try to build it up. But, one thing about Ohio State, with Chip Kelly coming in and now calling the plays and stuff, they brought in a quarterback that's probably going to do really well. Probably maybe the best guy they've had in a little while. I know they had C.J. Stroud and all that, and he was great and all this stuff. But I believe this guy that came from Kansas State, Will Howard. He is for lack of a better word, he's a college quarterback. I think he's really going to do well. And,
right.
I think Ohio State, and I've said this several times now going into this season. On paper, of course, that doesn't mean a whole lot. You still got to play all the games. Ohio State is probably the strongest team in the country right now across the board. Of course, Georgia has an argument, but there's only maybe 2 or 3 teams that have an argument.
Right.
My opinion, it's really Ohio State and Georgia. Until somebody proves it different. We talk about the preseason polls and all that and everything. I think that they probably got it right in those first 2 anyways. And I think it's going to come down to that. Of course, they both have bigger games to play. Ohio State's schedule is probably a little more favorable. From who they play, the conferences that they play in, and all that. I know Georgia has a run coming up. Alabama has a tough run coming up. So, it'll all play out, but we'll see. But I still think those are probably, we're going to right now, and as time goes on, I think we're going to see that those are probably the 2 best teams in the country.
Yeah, with Will Howard, I definitely see more like a JT Barrett, but better, but great college quarterback. Not necessarily somebody that's going to go to the pros and light it up. And I'm not saying he's not. I'm just saying he's not one of those, oh, my God, this guy's going to light up on Sundays. He might go be a good silver backup. Heck, for all I know, he could go win 4 Super Bowls. But just looking at the part, he's built like a good college quarterback. He's got a ton of experience under his belt, so he's not going to be flustered. And I watched the tape, obviously, being a fan of Buckeyes a few times this weekend, and I was impressed more after I saw more tape where he was throwing good balls. A couple of them had drops in the beginning, but he was throwing some nice balls. He had some nice runs that were designed for him, as well as just he had that one really bonehead play where he tried to flip it over on a screen to Henderson. Ended up being a lateral, but thank God Henderson fell on the ball. But,
I was going to say he kind of reminds me more of a Mac Jones kind of guy in college football. Like I said, I think he's got a lot of tools to work with. He's in a much better situation than he was in at Kansas State, and they did well there. So I think that's going to go well for Buckeye Nation.
I mean, Mac Jones being at Alabama and playing on that team with Devontae Smith and all that pretty much got him into the NFL to the Patriots before they realized.
Right, well, true.
Yeah. But so speaking of teams that could potentially, have something to say about who the top teams are, one of them plays this weekend. We'll talk about this game. Texas. Both these teams went to the Final Four last year. Texas has got most everybody back. We know that team on the right doesn't. I almost put a big X on there, but I decided not to because I won't be a homer. But Texas is going up to the Big House, so they call it. The big toilet bowl, I call it, and they got Quinn Ewers. They did lose a couple of guys in the NFL receivers, but I guess they got guys in the back that are supposed to be just as good. They've lost some running backs in the preseason, the camp and all that. I think 2 of them have gone down for the season, so the running game may not be something. There may be a problem. They may be more of a passing attack because of the lack of the sound running game. And if they can't get their run game going against Michigan, which Michigan's strength as their team is built now, but with everything they lost last year, is on their defensive line and defense in the backfield. So they might have to pass the ball. That may not be a bad thing because yours can spin it. They'll spread them out and run around. So if Texas goes up there and just let's say they blow them out, then I think Texas is going to have it's going to jump up in the polls for sure. That's a big one on the road and against the defending champion, who's supposed to have a decent defense still, and they probably should. But we won't know any of this stuff until the end of the year, anyways. But that's a big road win for them. And of course, if Michigan is able to win that game, even convincingly, even though it's at home, that's a nice win for them because that's a team that's considered to be on the rise. There's no doubt from last year.
Right. Well, yes, absolutely. There's not a bigger game this weekend than this one right here. Texas and Michigan. Of course, Michigan, going through a lot of changes, much like Alabama did. Texas, pretty solid. Sarkisian there. The quarterback's back. They look pretty good. I mean, the fact that the biggest thing that Michigan's got going for them is that they have this game at home,
right?
Because I mean they lost an awful lot.
Oh yeah.
I mean across. I mean from a coach. All the way through. So they're billing it as offense versus defense. Texas offense versus Michigan's defense. That's how they're kind of building this game right here. Then I think has potential to be a really good game. It's a big test for Texas because they're coming up north and going to Michigan, but even a bigger test for Michigan with all the changes they've gone through and everything else. Are we still irrelevant? Are we still who we say we are and all that good stuff. So yeah, you're absolutely right. This game will tell us an awful lot, of what's going on. But like you said, I mean, there's such a long way to go. But I'm really looking forward to seeing this one. I got this one marked. I'll be right in front of the tube on this one.
Yeah, this is another kind of like the LSU USC from last week. This is another game that is just really awesome to see this early in the year. Big game, big teams that have, the defending national champion and the team that was in it and got beat by Washington, which nobody really saw that happening. I think that's who was right. Because it was Michigan beat Alabama. So, but if Texas loses this game, it's not going to be a killer. They can still win the SEC, not the Big 12, and get in. But obviously, SEC is a lot harder to win than the Big 12. For the most part, most people would agree with that. And then Michigan, obviously, if either team loses, it's not a killer. You can still win your conference, no matter which team you are. And Michigan's probably got an easier road to a certain degree on as far as the teams you're playing because they're not in the SEC, and it's just not as much across the board. Great teams right now in the Big Ten. There's some really good high teams, but then the middle, I think, definitely doesn't look quite as good as the SEC. So I'm not even familiar with Texas's schedule yet, but I'm sure it's tough no matter what. I don't know anybody. I think nobody's as tough as Florida, and they really aren't very good this year. And they've got, I think, when they get to close of November, they've got a 5-week stretch where they just play everybody that's awesome in the SEC or should be awesome. So interesting. But yeah, good game to have this early in the season, and it could obviously spell something good or bad for either one of the teams down the road when we start talking playoff seeding and all that. If either one of them doesn't win their conference, this game will mean a lot to them if they're the ones that win it. So
much like what we talked about the USC LSU game, could have the same implications here with Texas and Michigan as we move forward. Of course, there's no way we can know that right now, but
right.
I think that's going to be a good game. I look for Texas to come into Michigan and play a pretty solid game. Like I said, there's a lot more questions for Michigan than there is Texas at this point. But I mean, they are at home; they're in the big house, so obviously in college football and those kind of places plays a huge favor.
Oh yeah.
Especially when the big house, maybe not like going to Penn State or going to LSU or something, but still,
right.
Plays a huge part in momentum here for this game.
Yeah, I think the entire offensive line for Michigan, I believe, all left. They're all graduated.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're all in the NFL, but they're not there anymore. And so even if the guys were really good behind them, they don't have the experience behind them. So there's a little bit there if they're all studs, and who knows if they are. If they can try to control the line and get the running game ramped, that's probably one way to slow Texas down. With Sarkisian's track record, especially since he's been with Alabama, and then since then, he's definitely on the rise. Texas on the rise. If they can, give Ewers a pocket, I think it's gonna be a long day. He can just pick them apart. You know, like we always said, if you can have time to throw, you can't cover guys forever. And if they're doing that, you know, it could be a long day, especially if they can't run. They're going to do that a lot, at least try to. And so with that, I mean, I look for Texas to probably win that game. I think, you know, and I know I'm a Michigan hater and all that, but honestly, I think that offense with Sarkisian and that great, you know, the quarterback's real good. They got good guys at key positions. I think that's going to spell the difference, especially because I think Michigan's quarterback's a walk-on who didn't look great last week, and then Orji, who's the guy that just runs the Wildcat because he can't throw very well. So they got a 2-quarterback thing going on, and it's kind of ugly. So it should be interesting up there.
Yeah, like I said, you know, to me, a lot more questions for Michigan. But, you know, going back to the Texas thing, you know, I did watch them last week too. I'll tell you something I was really impressed with Texas. Well, the player Arch Manning, you know, all the billing and hype and all that stuff that he came in with, you know, well, he played a lot in that game, you know, most of the second half.
Yeah.
And I really thought that he made some plays that, you know, even though, yes, you know, second team and all that kind of stuff, but I thought that he made some plays that not your average second team guy is going to make.
Oh, yeah.
You know, starting to scramble with the ball and spotting a guy running down the side or, you know, open down the field and stuff like that. So, man, I think that guy could really be good. You know, of course, there's rumor. Now, rumor has it, and it should happen in my mind. He should transfer to Alabama.
Was that rumor in your mind, or?
Well, it probably is.
Okay.
I think I started the rumor, as a matter of fact.
Just now. No.
Yeah. Right here on this show. You heard it right here first.
Those are another rumor that I'll tell you that you won't like, and I think that my coworker started it actually, and he said somebody's saying that next year Nick Saban's going to be the coach of the Buckeyes, and I'm like, I don't see that at all. Not because we wouldn't want him. I don't think he wants to coach again, and that's the only reason. You know, I'm sure if he wanted to coach there, they would roll out the money. There's no doubt. But
you know, so far I've heard that he's going to Florida State, and you know, if Ohio State loses to Michigan, he's going to Ohio State, and you know, so he's not going nowhere. I mean, he's up in his 70s, and you know, he's still got an office there, and he's making plenty of money. I don't see him going anywhere. I think that the way that the game has changed and what drove him out of football right now. I don't think you're ever going to see Nick Saban coach again.
Yeah, I mean, you know, from a monetary standpoint, if he did go anywhere, I would just pick SMU first, because I don't know if you saw the article on ESPN today. They say in SMU, here come the billionaires, because they got so much money dumping money into SMU down there. They're like the Oregon of the South. So, you know, they're expected to be somebody in a few years with all that money they're pouring into NIL and all that. So SMU could be like, okay, Saban, here's, you know, $500 million or whatever, you know.
Yeah, I'd like to say, you know, I just I don't see it.
No, me either. But like I said, monetary speaking, that'd be the only place, because he ain't going to Florida State. There ain't no way, you know.
No,
they don't have the cash.
And the issues that he has with college football is not going to go away. You know, the NIL, you know, and you know, one of the big things that drove him to the retirement thing, or to step down, or whatever you want to call it, with his horrible timing last year, was you know, one of the top recruits that they went and talked to, the first thing he asked him, well, how much are you going to pay me?
Right.
You know, Nick Saban being old school, I mean, you know, he's not a Dabo Swinney. He did adapt to the game, you know, the run the ball, play defense. I mean, he did adapt to the game and open it up and start throwing with the people that he brought in. And that's key for any of these college teams. We've talked about this before. You know, the guys that you bring in, perfect example, you know, Ohio State bringing in Chip Kelly, bringing in a defensive guy. Now Ryan Day can really focus on the things he really needs to worry about. He doesn't have to worry about calling the play. He doesn't have to do anything like that. You know, he probably has one of the best offensive guys in the country. Sure. So, you know, bringing in people like that is what makes a difference in these programs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was Saban. I watched a little bit of Game Day last week. I thought he did great on Game Day. I think it's going to fit really well in there. He had some good lines, and he actually had somewhat of a swear word, if you will, during it, which they all laughed at. They said, "Well, Saban just broke the internet," so it was kind of
Yeah.
funny little thing going on. But yeah, he's definitely good, and I think he's right where he wants to be. And one thing I was going to say was what you talked about, and I'm not homering on your side of the ball or anything, but the reality is, I can't think of a college football coach that has won multiple national championships but has won it with different style teams, except for Nick Saban. I mean, he was
Right.
super defensive, run the ball for the longest time, and that got him some championships. And then when it seemed like things were changing a little ways, he like you said, he evolved and adapted. And next thing you know, they've got a team that's leading whoever would have thought Nick Saban team in Alabama would have been leading the league in passing yardage and quarterback stuff.
Well,
But
yeah,
that's what he did.
Exactly, and it was the people he brought in. It was the Lane Kiffin, the Steve
Right.
Sarkisian. It was those kind of things that opened that up and changed it. At least he was smart enough, bright enough. However you want to call it, to bring those kind of guys in and make those changes.
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's I keep going back to the Dabo Sweeney thing. You got to adapt, or you're going to get left behind.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
Or as Nick Saban, you're crap out of luck.
Exactly. Yeah. So you saw it too. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw it.
so a few other games I got. So those are the somewhat bigger games, but this game here, Tennessee at NC State. Both these teams are looking to try to cement themselves in each of their leagues. Tennessee had a pretty nice year a couple of years ago when they beat Alabama. I think last year they dropped off a little bit, but they had a little bit changing of some. I know they had Joe Milton at one point, and everybody in the Big Ten knew that guy wasn't going to do a whole lot of anything for them. NC State's always been kind of right there, but not quite right there. So this is a interesting game, up at or down, I should say, at the Wolfpack's home, and it's another one of those. It's a good win for whoever wins that could hopefully lead them down the road. Not quite as big, as tasty and sexy, so to speak, with the other teams, but still a win that's going to matter. That's going to be a hard-fought game, I believe.
Well, yeah, Tennessee last year. I think Tennessee went through an awful lot of injuries.
Yeah.
They had a lot of things going on last year. I think Tennessee is back. I think that Josh Heppel, I think he does a good job there. Not one of my favorite people, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't do a good job coaching. So
Right.
I think North Carolina State. I think they're going to have their hands full with Tennessee.
They're at home, but I would go with Tennessee on that one. I believe, because I think I like Josh Heupel's offense when it's rolling. I think this year they got it, like you said, they got it going back, and it could get ugly for NC State if they don't, or if they're not able to slow them down, so to speak. This is always a big one. They call it the Cy-Hawk game because the Cyclones and the Hawkeyes in-state rivalry. It's neat they're still playing this, even though with all the realignment. Getting it a lot earlier in the year. Used to be a little bit later towards the end of the year, but still a hard-fought game. And, I don't know if you watched any tape last week, but I think Iowa scored more points last week than they did the entire year combined last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, yeah. I mean, they scored more than 10. They scored more than they did last year. I mean, they struggled to score last year. So, yeah. But, Iowa State, to me has I don't know what all's changed there and everything, but they've kind of fallen off the last couple of years from what we've seen in the previous time for that. There was a time that Iowa State was they kind of put themselves right in the thick of things and kind of an Appalachian State on steroids.
Right.
A little bit bigger program, a little bit better team.
Yeah.
But it seems like the last couple of years they haven't been quite what we had seen in the past. So it could still be a very interesting game.
Yeah, when Matt Campbell got there, he turned things around kind of nice. He had guys like Brock Purdy, obviously, who's at San Francisco, and guys that aren't. He isn't getting 4 and 5 star guys, but he's getting the most out of younger star talent, if you will. But his defensive coordinator implemented that 3-3-5 or whatever, that new kind of defense. They were one of the first ones. That's how they beat Oklahoma a couple times in a row when Oklahoma was supposed to be. But then people figured him out, because anytime you do something for a while, you get tape on it, the strong minds start figuring you out. And he had a little bit of turnover. And, in the last couple of years in the Big 12, Oklahoma and then Texas really, stepped it up, and so they kind of pushed Iowa State a little back a little bit. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of team they have all together, but typically it's a hard out, and then
Oh yeah.
Iowa, we know Iowa's defense is what it is. If they're scoring points and they're playing defense like they have been, there's no reason why Iowa can't be a pretty strong team this year. Maybe 10 wins, you just don't know. But it's hard to say that for Iowa because historically they can't score. But it looks like this year that might be different.
Yeah, true. So that'll be the interesting thing to see is how Iowa in this game here, and then how it unfolds moving forward.
Yeah, and kudos to Kirk Ferentz because he fired his son, who was the offensive coordinator. So at least he didn't keep it in the family, right?
Right.
And then let's see. Definitely, I think I got two more. This one for sure will be a hard-fought game. Another SEC Big 12 Oklahoma State OSU. They, I think, were in the championship game last year in the Big 12, and the Razorbacks are looking to, what is it? I can't remember the coach's name, but I know they got Petrino back there for a third time as offensive coordinator. So they're looking to get offensive better. I just can't remember the guy's name. I can see his face though, but that's a hard-fought game, and I think SEC might be looking at a loss on this one because they got that running back who last week for Oklahoma State looked like he's in midseason form. I mean, he ran for a ton of yards last year, and he ran for a ton of yards last game. I think, what's his name? I think it starts with an O. I can't remember, but they're definitely looking like they haven't missed a beat down there at Stillwater.
Yeah, Arkansas is one of those teams. The last couple of years is just, you don't really know what you're going to get from week to week. One time they come out, they'll play a great game. They seem to play up to the competition and down to the competition. If you know what I mean. So,
yeah.
Oklahoma State, lots of high hopes for them this year. A lot of talk about them and the possibilities that they're a dark horse. For to get in and make some real noise in the playoffs and all that kind of stuff. So it'd be interesting to see what happens with these games. And that's the thing about early in the season. We keep repeating ourselves. Well, how it's going to play out as we move forward. But I love to see these kind of games. Does it tell us a whole lot? Well, I mean, it tells us some, but of course, then when they're not, when you get into your divisions where it really matters, and now with 12 teams, you still have a lot of hope, a lot of chances. So that'll be interesting. But I do love these early matchups like this.
Yeah, with Oklahoma State, they were in the Big 12 championship game last year, and now Texas, who won that game, and Oklahoma are gone. So it's kind of like they kind of slide up to the top, and of course, in comes Utah, which could potentially be their toughest competitor with Utah and what they've done in the Pac-12 the last few years. Moving into that conference, they look pretty strong, and they got Cam Rising, who is, I think, as old as you are, still playing football. So,
he's not as old as me. Trust me.
So yeah, it definitely seems like they're the de facto team to get it back and try to win it this time. And of course, if you do, you get in. The top four conference winners are automatic buys for the first four. So I think they're feeling pretty good. And we'll just see what happens. In the Big 12. Of course, Colorado comes back into it, and then as well as Utah and I can't remember Arizona. I think Arizona's coming in. So
that's one of the other games. I'm not sure what your last game is that we were going to talk about. I can't remember when I looked at the list, but the one I was looking at was Boise State and Utah.
Yeah,
that could be a heck of a game. That Boise State's another team that just keeps getting it done, pull off big upsets.
Yeah,
so, that could be an interesting matchup there.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, that game is at Utah, isn't it? I think Boise State's on the road with that. Because if they are, I was kind of thinking, man, if that was at Boise State, I think that might be a really interesting game because Utah typically plays pretty good at home, but you'll have to double check me on that one. But that's not the last one I had, but that definitely was one I was looking at, but I feel strongly about Utah winning that, even because and I know Boise's not quite what they used to be, but yet they're still a very tough out. And then playing on that blue field, that always freaks everybody out, But
That's it's really kind of cool, isn't it?
Oh yeah. And I think I saw somebody else. I can't remember what team it is. I think it's a lower division team in football this year.
No,
They beat a
no. I take
Redfield.
it back. Boise State and Oregon.
Oh, that's right,
Boise
Oregon.
State plays.
Yeah.
Boise State plays Oregon. What did I see? Utah.
Who do they play?
Oh, I could have swore
Because
I
I
seen
saw it too.
Utah here.
Mm.
Boise State and Oregon. Sorry about that. I missed that one.
The thing about that one is, I think it's at Oregon, and Oregon didn't look super great last week against Idaho. Which so if they, kind of what is it? Are they going to do it 2 weeks in a row?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Baylor and Utah. Baylor and Utah.
Yeah. Well, that's right, because it's not a Big 12 game. They're both in the
Right.
Big 12, but the game was already scheduled when they were still in the Pac 12, and they kept it. So even though they're both Big 12 teams, it doesn't count against the Big 12 schedule, which is interesting. And they don't
Right.
play each other again this year unless they meet to the final game. So, but it's at Utah, isn't it?
That game is. Took me ever to find it, and then I had it, and
I'm
I was
pretty
looking
sure.
at that. I don't know how I got that mixed up, or how those were playing. Baylor at Utah.
Yeah. So I was feeling good about Baylor or Utah winning that game. So, but
Well-
I mean, Boise State at Oregon, you never know, because Oregon did not look super great last week against Idaho. But first, they lost some key guys. One Bo Nix, the NFL. So are they reloading with? They got the dude from Oklahoma out there at Oregon. Dylan Gabriel. So whether or not he's going to fit in the system and do well or not is another thing. It's one thing about transfer portal. Like Nick Saban said, they don't always fit in really good. You're paying them a bunch of money. Like you said, if you're not paying the right guys, then you are out of luck, so to speak.
Yeah, they
But
have BYU and SMU are playing right now. As a matter of fact.
Yep. There's some bad blood in that from way back. But the last game I had for sure. The reason why, there's a couple of reasons. One, as a Buckeye fan, I definitely want to see Kyle McCord lose and not sit there and light it up against a bunch of puds, and everybody's saying they shouldn't have got rid of him.
Now, why do you want to see him lose?
As I'm an idiot.
Oh, the guy won every game for you except for one. I mean, come on.
I wouldn't say he won the games for us. He was the quarterback of the team that won the game.
When you're the quarterback, you're out there leading the team. So that's just the way it goes. I don't know who was going to. I don't think that they were going to. Dadgummit.
But
this keeps going haywire.
But I mean, all seriousness aside, Syracuse 1-0 in the ACC, or I should say 1-0. They're not in the ACC. Georgia Tech does have a win in the ACC. They beat Florida State. They won last week, I think, against Jack. I can't remember who they played last week. So they're 2-0, 1-0 in the ACC. Syracuse is, at home. This is, I think, a potential buzzsaw for Syracuse, because Georgia Tech has got to be riding high. They put it to Florida State pretty bad. They pushed them all over the field. They got that Haynes King, and he's lighting it up. And if they are going to be what they look like they could be, moving forward, they should have some success against Syracuse. And if their defense, which was really interesting to watch against Florida State, has a day like that against McCord, there could be a lot of problems for McCord, because when he wasn't great last year, it was because when the pocket was he's not a guy that's going to make it extend the play. You don't have great legs or anything. So I think Georgia Tech's got this game at hand. I don't know if they can blow them out or anything, but they might.
I think so.
Yeah, because I don't think Syracuse is as good as Florida State, but I guess we'll never know. And we will know by the end of the year. So
yeah, I think Georgia Tech will be fine in this game. They're that's another team that if you look at all the predictions and the hype and all that stuff, whenever they talk about teams that possibly a dark horse or however you want, outside chance, however you want to look at that.
Right.
Georgia Tech is another team that's mentioned in that quite a bit.
Yeah, and there's always, they say, one team that is not in the top 25 that ends up being in the top 10 by the end of the season, preseason top 25. And I don't think Georgia Tech was ranked before in the preseason. And they're already looking like they got a good leg up on being a top 10 team by the end of the year. It's a long way to go, and there's a lot of teams out there. But, if they make it to the top end of the standings in the ACC, they almost certainly be a top 10 team, because you got to figure with no divisions, there's no 6-win teams going to the championship games anymore, 6 losses teams, whatever. It's going to be, one and 2 loss teams at the most, maybe 3, maybe, I doubt it, but 1 and 2 loss teams for sure in all the championship games of the conferences. So all the winners will get in. I think all the runner-ups are going to be getting in too, and getting a home game. So you make it to the conference championship game in your conference, you're certainly playing for a bye or a home game. Almost certainly in the top 4 at least. So
yeah, another team that really looked good last week was Miami.
Yep, yeah, and they have that Ward from Oregon State, Cam Ward, from Oregon State, and they went up and beat up bad on a Florida team. But it's at the Swamp, and it's a hard place to play.
It is.
Florida is. They're figuring that it's going to be interesting. It's still a Power 4 team, still good stuff. So Miami moving forward is going to be interesting to see how well they do against when they get to a bit better play. We haven't talked about a game last week I was a little surprised to see Notre Dame go to A&M. It was a tight game, but they came out with a win. That was a nice win for them.
That was a great win for them. I mean, talk about tough places to play. Texas A&M is one of the toughest places to play in the country. Yeah, yep. That was a huge win for Notre Dame. Tough place to play. A really good game. Really good game. All the way down to about the final 4 minutes, 5 minutes, something like that. I mean, it came all the way down to that. But that was a good win for Notre Dame.
Yeah, absolutely. There's another game I caught after it started, and I thought, oh wow, this is a competitive game. Not that I didn't think it was going to be, but. And Notre Dame's in it, which is good. Keep it close, and they ended up getting a nice score in the end to lock it in and stuff. So, very nice road win. That's going to look real nice on a resume. Regardless, I think if A&M, other than lose every game, if A&M isn't one of the top 2 teams in the SEC, I still think it helps Notre Dame because everybody knows it's tough to go in there and get a win. There's no doubt.
It is. Yeah. That was that's another game that I watched.
Yeah, I watched a lot of it. Didn't see the beginning, but I did watch a lot of it. And then I thought Penn State going to West Virginia was a nice win for them. A lot of questions around Drew Aller, how he's going to look, and he looked pretty good. And that's a decent team. They went in and they won 9 wins last year, West Virginia. So to go in there, and that was a hostile crowd, and to beat them pretty decently. That was a nice win for Penn State. Penn State usually gets some nice wins early in the season, so you got to see what happens when they get to meet their schedule. But again, nice win for Penn State.
Well, they get nice wins until they run into Michigan and Ohio State.
Right.
Of course, now, like I said, I'm not, the Big Ten schedule. I'm not. I haven't really looked. How I always look ahead. What's happening in week 3, week 4. Next thing I know, it's week 2, and I'm looking at week 5. They had tendency to do that, but with Oregon and USC, with the changes in Oklahoma and Texas, both of them going to their new conferences, and especially the Big Ten, I haven't really looked at how that's going to affect because, basically in the Big Ten, it's the big 3. It's Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. I don't know how that whole Oregon USC thing going to play out.
Right.
With those teams, with those 3 teams, how they match up. Or even if they do play each other, they may not. I haven't looked at it, so I don't know.
Yeah, I know off the top of my head because typically you look at Ohio State goes to Penn State this year. Is it the whiteout game? This year it's not. It's a day game for big noon because Fox loves the big noon kickoff. The whiteout game this year for Penn State is Washington coming into Penn State. That's going to be a tough time. They're going to have a tough time anyways just because everybody they lost, although they got the coach from Arizona, and I think they won last week, so they did what they're supposed to do, so to speak. So it'll be interesting how good of a team they have, being a team that went to the Final Four last year, the Final 2 actually. And so that's a whiteout game is that. And then when Ohio State goes to Penn State, even though it's noon, they call it the stripe game where they have the sections of the stadium blue and white all the way around.
Right.
So it's always a hostile crowd at Happy Valley. I mean, you remember when Auburn went there a couple of years ago and you saw the whiteout for the first time. It's nuts up there. So
it is. It really is.
They've got a 2-headed running back deal going on, and they got a quarterback that looks like he's, settling into his second full year as a starter. And then, of course, the defense is always something good at Penn State. Historically, more, I should say, modern historically, under James Franklin. They're not deep on defense, so if, you can stay with them in the first half. You usually wear them down the second half, so we'll see how deep they are, this year or not. But good team, tough beat, tough out there. I know USC goes to U of M sometime this year, so that's going to be a tough place for them to play, just like Texas is going this week.
Right.
And I think Penn State has to go to USC, I think, or something. I mean, it's pretty crazy, some of the games they got on the schedule. One thing I do remember is Rutgers doesn't play any of those big teams. They don't play Ohio State or Penn State, I don't think, or Michigan or USC and Oregon. It's like they have a crazy, would say easy schedule. I won't say easy, and they're looking like they could really win a lot of games for them because they don't have to play a lot. And I don't know, I've seen some of the tiebreakers, but it's going to be really interesting in all 3 and 4 of these Power Fours, which are all straight up and down with no divisions, but they all can't play each other. There's too many teams. How they're going to let this play out and start taking tiebreakers when you got 4 teams with 1 loss at the top. Then it starts getting into teams. Have you played each other? Have you played common opponents? And it's nuts. I've seen the tiebreakers a little bit, and it gives me a headache. It's nuts.
It's, the big thing is get in, I guess. For most of them.
Right.
Some teams expect to be there, and people expect. Not only does the program expect them to be there, but us as fans and everybody else expects them to be there too. And then outside of that, it's the group of teams that just let us get in.
Oh yeah.
Yep. And, who knows what kind of noise they can make once they are in there.
Yeah, no doubt. So we're coming up on 50 plus minutes. It's been a great show for week 2. Lots of good football. There's some on tonight, and then of course tomorrow night. Tomorrow all day. All day and tomorrow night. Great games that are. It's just as this season builds, and I know we can talk about it in a few weeks. There's a weekend coming up where everything is going crazy on the schedule. There's like 5 games that are just unbelievable, and it is the weekend Ohio State goes to Oregon, and there's other teams games on that are just Michigan, crazy looking.
Alabama and Georgia.
Is that the? Oh wow.
Yeah, that same week, Alabama and Georgia.
And I think that's at Tuscaloosa this year. I thought I heard Georgia.
It is.
So I mean, good for Alabama on that one. They're having it at home. That's probably at least right now, the big game on the schedule. Of course, you never know what happens between now and then with other teams, but big schedule there. So should be a lot of fun. So don't forget, guys, we got chats. If you want to talk to us while we're on live, we can. If you got something good to say, we'll put it on. Let the whole world see it. We're not opposed to having a third person pop in here if you got somebody that feels good on camera and you don't mind talking to a couple old dudes. We'll put you on. And so it's the Fletch Entertainment Network right here on Facebook and YouTube. Once again, like us on Facebook, the bells, and subscribe on YouTube to stay up on everything we're doing here. And any last final words you want to say, Randy?
No, like I said, looking forward to 12 o'clock tomorrow.
Oh yeah,
that's like I said. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that game. But we both love college football, and we pretty much live for it on Saturday.
Yeah,
I don't think either one of us really care a whole lot about what happens on Sunday, but we do pay a little bit of attention to it. Yeah,
it's I even more now. I pay attention to like the team that I root for as players that are in the NFL and what they're doing. I kind of like to see. You like to see the guys that played your favorite school, go out and do good in the big one. But yeah, it's not like it used to be, and unfortunately, I think our wonderful college football might be headed that way. But hopefully, we're all past and gone before they ruin this great sport. But
right, absolutely.
So. All right. Until next week, we will see you guys and enjoy the games. Of course, tomorrow at noon is the big game on the schedule. Texas at Exeter, Michigan, or Muskegon, however you want to say it.
The Skunk Weasels. Up north.
The Skunk Weasels, as some of them call it. Yeah, the team up north. So,
the team
all right. We'll be here next week. We'll shooting for Thursday, and I'll get it out there whether we do it Thursday or Friday. But we're shooting for Thursday, 8 o'clock, right here in the Fletch Entertainment Network. We'll see y'all next week.
Have a good weekend.